Everyone in the restaurant laughed when a homeless teen walked in asking only for food, until she touched the piano keys. What happened next silenced the entire room and changed her life forever. "Can I play for food?" The quiet but confident voice broke the chatter inside Bella's Bistro, a cozy restaurant glowing with warm lights on a chilly evening. Heads turned, and a sudden hush swept through the room like a soft breeze snuffing out a candle. Near the entrance stood a teenage girl in a worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers, her hair messy from the winter wind and damp from a drizzle that had been falling all evening. A small backpack, faded from years of use, hung loosely from her narrow shoulders, as if it were as heavy as the entire world she carried. Customers exchanged puzzled looks, spoons pausing midway to mouths, wine glasses stilled in the air. A couple by the window leaned toward each other, whispering as they took in the unexpected visitor. A man near the bar gave a low chuckle, shaking his head as though he'd seen this scene too many times before. To most of them, she looked like another homeless teen searching for a handout, just another sad story passing through on a cold night. The owner, Mr. Lewis, a stout man with a trimmed gray beard and a white apron dusted with flour, raised an eyebrow as he wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Play?" he repeated, his tone hovering between amusement and suspicion. "We don't pay street performers in food," he said, half amused but also wary. His voice carried easily in the suddenly quiet room, echoing against the brick walls and the soft clink of cutlery that followed. But the girl didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her eyes, an intense shade of hazel that caught the dim light like polished glass, remained fixed on him. "Just one song," she insisted, her voice steady though her fingers clutched the strap of her backpack with white-knuckled determination. "If you like it, maybe a bowl of soup?" A draft of cold air followed her words. Sneaking in from the door she had barely closed behind her. Somewhere near the fireplace, a log popped sharply, the sound startling in the silence. A waiter glanced at the hostess with a raised eyebrow. The hostess, a young woman with neatly tied hair and a pearl clip that gleamed under the warm lamps, bent slightly toward a waiter and whispered, "Does she even know how to play?" Her voice was low, but in the thick quiet of the restaurant, it carried enough for a few nearby diners to hear. A couple of teenagers seated near the front exchanged a quick giggle, covering their mouths with their sleeves, while an older gentleman in a brown coat frowned at them for their lack of respect. A mother at a corner table instinctively pulled her child closer, though the girl at the door made no move toward anyone. The girl's breath formed a faint mist in the warm air as she stood waiting, her posture calm but her gaze unyielding. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the wet pavement, the sound of passing traffic muffled by the thick wooden door. Inside, forks rested on plates, coffee cups cooled, and every eye, some curious, some skeptical, some strangely hopeful, remained fixed on the stranger who had dared to ask not for money, but for a chance to be heard. Mr. Lewis exhaled slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening as he studied her. The room seemed to hold its breath, the scent of baked bread and roasted garlic suddenly sharper in the silence. After a long pause, Mr. Lewis sighed, his breath escaping in a slow cloud of resignation. "Fine," he said at last, wiping his flour-dusted hands on a dish towel. "The piano's in the corner. One song." The girl nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and stepped forward. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the polished wooden floor, each step echoing in the hush that had settled over the bistro. Chairs creaked as diners shifted to watch. A waiter instinctively lowered the flame on a nearby candle, as if to give the moment more gravity. She approached the upright piano near the window, its mahogany surface catching the glow of hanging lanterns. It wasn't a concert grand, just an old instrument that usually served as background for weekend jazz, but tonight it felt like a stage. She rested her small backpack on the floor beside the piano bench, slid onto the seat, and inhaled deeply. Her thin fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, whether from nerves or the lingering chill of the night outside. No one could tell. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, like a whisper testing the room. A few diners exchanged looks, wondering if this was all she could do. But then, suddenly, the melody bloomed. Her hands moved with startling speed and grace, weaving a cascade of harmonies that filled the restaurant, rich and powerful. The sound swirled through the bistro like a living thing, notes tumbling, rising, and folding back on themselves in intricate patterns. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the faint hum of the kitchen seemed to fade, as if the world beyond the music no longer existed. Her music told a story without words. The ache of cold nights beneath a starless sky, the flicker of hope that refuses to die, the quiet strength that keeps a lonely heart moving forward. Each chord carried a piece of her journey, from loss to resilience, from silence to a voice no one could ignore. The laughter that had greeted her entrance vanished, replaced by wide-eyed wonder. People leaned closer, captivated. A young couple near the bar clasped hands, their eyes glistening. A man who had been scrolling on his phone set it down without realizing. Near the fireplace, a little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, his own eyes shining. "Mom," he whispered, barely daring to disturb the magic. "Is she famous?" The mother only shook her head, transfixed. "Not yet," she murmured. Even Mr. Lewis, who had heard countless live musicians over the years, from confident professionals to eager amateurs, stood still, jaw slightly open. He felt the music in his chest, a vibration that seemed to tug at memories of his own youth, of dreams half forgotten. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, keeping time with her rhythm. Inside, hearts beat to her tempo. For a brief, breathless span, Bella's Bistro was no longer a simple neighborhood restaurant. It was a concert hall, a cathedral, a place where strangers shared the same astonishment. And at the center of it all sat the girl in the worn hoodie, eyes closed, fingers dancing like they had been born for this very moment. When the final chord faded, the room seemed to hang in a suspended silence, as if no one dared to breathe and risk breaking the spell she had woven. Then, all at once, the quiet burst into sound. Chairs scraped back. Palms met in a wave of applause that rolled through the bistro like thunder. A few diners even rose to their feet, their claps echoing against the brick walls. The girl gave a shy half-smile and stood slowly. As if waking from a dream, she wasn't sure she wanted to leave. She stepped back from the piano, her hands still tingling from the force of the music. A strand of hair fell into her face, and she tucked it behind her ear, cheeks flushed from the intensity of her performance. "What's your name?" A diner near the center called out, his voice warm with admiration. "Lena," she said softly, almost unsure of how it sounded in a room now filled with people eager to know her. The single word seemed to carry more weight than her small frame. An older woman in a knitted shawl approached, her eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked, her voice gentle, as if speaking too loudly might frighten the girl away. Lena hesitated, her gaze dropping to the scuffed floor. "My mom taught me before she got sick." Her eyes flickered with both pride and pain, the memories playing like faint notes behind her words. "We used to have a piano at home. She believed music could heal almost anything. But after she passed, I had to leave. Been figuring things out since." The crowd murmured softly, the earlier whispers of doubt replaced by a low hum of compassion. Some faces showed guilt for laughing when she first walked in, their earlier amusement now a bitter taste. Others simply stared, amazed that someone with so little could hold so much talent and courage. A man in a tailored coat stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "You mean you've been on your own?" "All this time." Lena gave a small shrug. "I stay where I can. Sometimes friends help, sometimes it's a shelter. I just keep moving." Her voice wavered for a moment, but she steadied it with a quiet strength that made even the most skeptical listener believe in her resilience. A young mother near the fireplace clutched her child a little tighter. The little boy, still wide-eyed from the music, whispered, "She sounds like Magic Mama." The mother nodded slowly. "She does." Mr. Lewis, who had remained at the edge of the gathering crowd, finally stepped forward. His earlier skepticism had melted into something closer to awe. "Your mother must have been proud," he said quietly. Lena's eyes glistened as she gave a faint, sad smile. "I hope so. I like to think she hears me when I play." For a moment, the bistro felt less like a restaurant and more like a family home, everyone united by the fragile, powerful story of a girl and her music. The aroma of roasted garlic and fresh bread mingled with an unexpected warmth, a collective realization that they had witnessed something extraordinary. And in that shared silence, the laughter of an hour ago felt like a distant, regrettable echo, replaced by respect and a deep, unspoken admiration for the girl who had walked in from the cold and filled the room with light. Mr. Lewis returned from the kitchen carrying a steaming bowl of creamy vegetable soup and a plate of freshly baked bread. The aroma of herbs and garlic drifted ahead of him, warming the air like a soft blanket. He set the dishes gently on the table nearest the piano, his usual briskness replaced with quiet respect. "For you," he said, his voice low but kind. "On the house. You've already given us more than we can repay." Lena blinked, startled by the sudden kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, sliding onto the chair, as though she were afraid the offer might disappear if she moved too quickly. The steam curled upward, fogging the edge of the window beside her. As she lifted the spoon, a well-dressed man who'd been dining near the front rose from his seat. He moved with a calm authority, his tailored charcoal suit catching the golden light of the hanging lamps. "I'm Daniel Hart," he said warmly, extending a hand as he approached. "I run a music foundation here in the city. We help young artists get training, lessons, even performance opportunities." Lena hesitated before shaking his hand, her fingers still cold despite the warmth of the room. "You have something rare, Lena," Daniel continued, his eyes steady with conviction. "That performance wasn't just skill. It was heart, and that's something we can't teach." Her spoon paused midair, a bead of soup trembling at the edge. "Me? But I don't even have a place to stay." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the careful calm she'd tried to maintain all evening. "That can change," Daniel replied, his tone reassuring. "If you're willing, we can arrange lessons, a proper piano to practice on, even a scholarship if you want to pursue this seriously. Your talent shouldn't be hidden on the streets." The diners, who had once greeted her with skepticism and quiet laughter, now shifted forward in their seats. A wave of soft murmurs spread through the room, admiration, encouragement, and something deeper, as though each person felt a small responsibility for the girl who had unexpectedly brightened their night. A woman in a burgundy scarf reached into her handbag and discreetly walked to Lena's side, slipping a folded bill into the outer pocket of her worn backpack. "Just a little help," she said with a smile before returning to her table. Another diner, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, stood and removed his heavy wool coat. "It's cold out," he said, draping it carefully over the back of Lena's chair. "You'll need this more than I do." Lena looked from face to face, her eyes wide. The kindness felt almost overwhelming, like sunlight breaking through after a long winter. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only a soft, breathless sound that might have been a thank you. From behind the counter, Mr. Lewis watched the scene unfold, his own eyes misting. The girl who had stepped into his bistro as a stranger was leaving as something far more, a reminder of the music and compassion that could still surprise the world. Around them, the bistro seemed to glow a little brighter. Conversations resumed in warm, gentle tones, but every so often someone would glance at Lena, as if to reassure themselves that this moment was real. A single evening when a bowl of soup, a melody, and unexpected generosity could change a life forever. Weeks later, Bella's bistro transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Tiny white lights were strung across the windows, casting a gentle glow onto the wet cobblestones outside. Inside, candles flickered on every table, and the warm scent of fresh bread and roasting vegetables drifted through the air. A chalkboard by the door announced the evening's event in bold, looping letters: "A night with Lena." Word the girl who had once walked in from the cold and filled the restaurant with music had spread quickly through town. Neighbors told neighbors. Social media posts traveled even farther. By the time the doors opened, the bistro was filled to capacity. Every table was taken, and a small crowd gathered near the entrance, eager for a glimpse of the young pianist whose story had already touched so many hearts. Lena sat at the same upright piano near the window, but tonight it shone under soft stage lights that Mr. Lewis had borrowed from a local theater. Someone had polished the wood until it gleamed. A simple bouquet of winter flowers rested on top, a quiet tribute to her late mother. Lena herself looked transformed. Her hair was brushed smooth, her clothes neat and warm, but her calm, steady gaze was the biggest change of all. When she placed her fingers on the keys, a hush fell over the room. She began with a slow, tender melody, an echo of the piece she had played on that first night. But now her notes carried a new assurance, a quiet strength born from weeks of practice and the security of knowing she no longer had to face the world alone. The music swelled, weaving in elements of classical runs and soulful improvisations that left the audience breathless. Conversations ceased entirely. Even the kitchen was still, the clatter of pots and pans replaced by the pure resonance of piano strings. People leaned forward, caught in the story she told without words, of struggle and survival, of loss and love, of finding hope in the most unexpected places. In the front row sat Mr. Lewis, his arms folded across his chest, though his eyes betrayed the emotion he tried to hide. Beside him were many of the same diners who had once doubted her, now smiling, some even wiping tears. Daniel Hart sat nearby, his expression one of quiet pride. He had arranged for Lena to begin private lessons and had already spoken to a music conservatory about a potential scholarship. When the final note lingered and faded into the soft hum of the room, a heartbeat of silence followed, as if everyone wanted the music to continue forever. Then the crowd erupted, applause roaring like a sudden storm. People rose to their feet in a standing ovation, cheers mixing with the sound of clapping hands. Lena turned from the piano, her eyes shining under the stage lights. She looked across the crowd, at Mr. Lewis, at Daniel, at the strangers who were no longer strangers, and felt something bloom in her chest. The girl who had once stood in this very spot and asked, "Can I play for food?" had found more than a warm meal. She had found mentors, a community, and the promise of a future filled with music. As the ovation continued, Mr. Lewis stepped forward, raising a hand for quiet. "Everyone," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "let's hear it once more for Lena, our very own Prodigy." The applause grew louder still, echoing through the winter night and spilling out into the street. And as Lena bowed, she felt for the first time in a long time, completely and wonderfully home. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.